I can't remember the last time I saw the original Vacation.
It's a classic. It's so much better than Christmas Vacation.
That's bold. That's a bold statement, sir. I'll have to check that out, actually. It's been a while since I saw that.
It's a good one. Matt Green, playoff teaser. This is your subset of the podcast tonight. How do you want to tee this off?
Well, it's just been so long since we talked about these games. We've talked about how flawed the college football playoff or the college football calendar is, that it's like the season's over. We're talking about new coaching hires. We're talking about the transfer portal. We're talking about signing day. We're just talking about all these different things. And it's like, oh, yeah, we still need to figure out who the best team is in the country. Still need to figure out sum up this whole season thing. And so I thought we did just a little teaser segment because we want to get our picks in, and we do this in our podcast later in the week. But Georgia-Ohio State, I think, is just such a sexy matchup. Let's be honest. Like, this is what the people wanted to see, what most people wanted to see in the national championship. But we're going to see it in Atlanta on the 31st. On the 31st, I should say. What is the number one thing you want to see in this game?
I think it's Stetson again, because the thing that I think people undervalue with Stetson Bennett is just what he does in big games. Because what I said about him and why he should not have been a Heisman finalist was just that, like, he tanks some bad games, like the Kent State one, the Mizzou games against inferior competition, where it was like, what are we watching here? Like, he really struggled in those kind of games, which is just weird. Because he comes through and just, like, the Oregon game to open the year, he's just like a man on a mission, and I'm going to bury you. He's wanting to bury Tennessee for leaking the phone number, and he does that gesture, and it's just, the swagger is right there. And then you look at what he did against LSU, and you go up and down the list, and I'm like, all right, let's look at his actual numbers against AP-ranked teams and, like, what the difference with him as a quarterback is. And it's just like, the dude had 15 TDs and 2 picks against AP-ranked teams, number 4 in the country. Stetson has completed 73% of his passes and is averaging 10.1 yards per attempt in those AP-ranked games. Like, he just amps up his play so much that I'm so curious to see if that continues against Ohio State, who I think is the best team he'll play this year. I mean, to this point. So I'm very curious to see if that trend continues and if Stetson is just like a different person, a different quarterback by and large when he's faced with big moments like the Alabama game last year. And I mean, I don't know. I'm just curious to see if that keeps up with a month layoff and what Ohio State is able to do to kind of limit what he's been able to just destroy all the big teams that he's played all year long, because it's a different guy. That's my biggest thing I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a good call, because there are some games that, like, was Stetson a Heisman candidate? You can argue forever if he deserved to be a finalist, but in the biggest games, you're right, he did come to play. I'm curious to see CJ Stroud versus this Georgia secondary, because this is obviously the Big Ten had a lot of good defenses this year. There's a debate to be had if it was a bunch of good defenses in the Big Ten or a bunch of bad offenses. You can kind of go either way. But when you look at Ohio State, like, with what Georgia did to Tennessee, like, that's obviously the best measuring stick for Georgia. It's like Ohio State feels like they have 2 elite college players when you talk about Hendon Hooker and Jalen Hyatt. But when you look at C.J. Stroud and Marvin Harrison Jr., it's like those are 2 NFL players. It's like, I don't know that Jalen Hyatt's going to be an elite NFL player. I personally think Cedric Tillman's like a better, like, pound for pound, like, receiver, like how he projects to the next level. But in, like, Hendon Hooker, it's like, is he more of a product of this great Heupel system? Is he truly like a first round talent type of thing? Like, it's hard to say. Like, C.J. Stroud seems like that prototype that NFL teams want. Marvin Harrison Jr. seems like just a first-round talent at wide receiver. These are going to be the 2 just truly best players I think Georgia's faced all season. And you've seen Georgia's secondary, hold up pretty well against most of the teams they played. Like, Bo Nix or Oregon and Tennessee were by far the two best offenses they played, and they scored a combined, I think, 16 points in those two games against Georgia. So I'm really curious to see what C.J. Stroud can do against this Georgia defense.
In terms of matchup to watch for me, I think it's just that, like, what's super fascinating is Georgia's number 2 in sacks allowed in the country. They've only given up 7 sacks in 13 games. Ohio State's right behind them at number 5, because Washington, Southern, and Georgia are all tied at number 2. Oregon only gave up 4 sacks all year long. Kind of coincidence as to whether or not or why Bo Nix had a great year. It turns out when quarterbacks have time, good quarterbacks, good things happen. Who would have thought? CJ Stroud has had just as much time all year long. He's only been sacked 8 times. So I wonder if Georgia is not able to get home against Ohio State and like the Ohio State offensive line holds up. What does that mean for it? Kind of leads into what you're saying with the secondary. It's like if CJ Stroud has time because he is such a pocket guy. It's not a Justin Fields. It's not a Cardale Jones or JT Barrett. Like, he is going to be in the pocket. Like, this guy who wants to stay in the pocket and fire downfield and just kill you in the intermediate stuff. And we'll see. But I'm very curious to see if that holds up and he is not forced to run or he's not shaken up because he's getting hit and just harassed more than he ever has, because to this point he's right there with Stetson where they have not had to run for their life really at all this whole season.
Yeah, and it's hard not to go back to the Tennessee game because it is just one game, and you don't want to make your entire opinion about Georgia be the Tennessee game because, I mean, the crowd had so much to do with just disrupting that offense as well. Like, I think Georgia's going to have, in Atlanta, they're going to have more than 50% of the fans, but Ohio State's a giant fan base. Like, they're going to travel attend for this one. This one's going to be – it's going to be much more neutral than the SEC championship or the Oregon Chick-fil-A kickoff game. Like, the matchup I'm curious to see, and you kind of alluded to it, is every game with Georgia gets made as whatever offense versus Georgia defense. Can Georgia's defense get, shut down this so-and-so offense? And it just gets kind of lost that Georgia's got a top 10 offense in college football, and they're the second best offense in the SEC this year, more productive than Alabama was. And going against Ohio State, like, Ohio State hasn't faced a lot of good offenses. Like, Ohio State's faced 2 top 50 offenses this season, and they scored an average of 38 points a game, and it was Penn State and Michigan. So Georgia's offense against Ohio State's defense, I think, is a matchup that I think is, if Ohio State's getting stops and can allow their offense to work and not have to score every time they get it, I think that's going to be the game changer for Ohio State.
Yeah, I don't know. So it's funny, like, where I flip now, because I said it's just going to be really hard. It's really, really hard to go 15-0. It's really hard to win back-to-back national titles. Like, it's just, especially in the expanded playoff era, and we definitely won't see it in the 12-team playoff era. Like, it's just the injuries and everything else. Like, there's just no way you're going 16, 17-0 in the modern college football landscape.
Undefeated is going to be much tougher, but back-to-back,
that's what I'm saying. Like, undefeated is
happen.
what I'm saying. Undefeated is just going to be, I mean, we'll probably see it once maybe, but it's just going to be really hard. There's a reason no one's going 16 or 17-0.
Not to interrupt your thought, but also if LSU 2019 just has to play the 12th ranked team and the 8th ranked team on the way to get into the, I'm sure they go 17-0 or whatever it takes.
Maybe. Injuries, but you got to remember, injuries are part of this. Like, that's a lot more games. Like, does Trevor Lawrence stay healthy for that many? Or, Joe Burrow. Like, I don't know. Like, Jamar Chase, who knows? It's just more possibilities. You're rolling the dice more for a devastating injury to happen and wreck your season. And we're going to see that. Like, that's the 12-team playoff fallout where we're going to see a playoff shift because someone got injured in the first round or something, and it's going to be a big-time quarterback, and it's going to shake things. But it's just where we're at. I will say, I'm leaning more towards Georgia takes care of business here, and then Michigan gets to just sit on TCU, and we'll get into them in a second. But, like, my heart's leading towards Michigan winning the national title, Matt Green. I think Georgia fans need to be pulling hardcore for TCU because they do not want the back-to-back physical body blow of Ohio State and Michigan and back.